You're watching MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23, a free educational service provided by Circle City Broadcasting of Indianapolis. Here's what's coming up this hour. Get more information, special announcements, and weekly program schedules online at wishtv.com, and be sure to follow us on Facebook. Here's what's coming up next.
I have some thinking questions for you today. Can you determine the value of x? So what does that mean? It means, can you think about what x would be equal to? I have an equation. Take a look. It says 4x plus 1 equals 13. Do you know what x is? Could you determine that? Some of you might think you know the answer. Some of you might say, yeah, it's 3. I got it. I can do it. Great. Others of you might be, maybe not so much. That's okay too. Let's look at another one. Whoa, that's a little bit longer. 3 times the quantity 4x minus 9 plus 10, all equal to 15x plus 2 plus 7x. All right, go. Find the x. Can you do it? I know I can't do it. I'd have to do some work. That's what we're going to focus on today. We're going to focus on how to do the work to determine the value of x. We're going to need to think about some properties to help us do that. They're called the properties of equality. You may have already heard of these properties of equality. You used them in 6th grade. You used them again in 7th grade. But let's take a refresher course in them because sometimes we don't always remember them. If A equals B, then A plus C equals B plus C. What did we do? We added a C to both sides. That's the addition property of equality. If I add the same thing to both sides, it's not going to change the fact that they're equal. The same thing happens when we use subtraction. If A equals B, then A minus C equals B minus C. That's the subtraction property of equality. Do you think you might know what the next one is? Did you guess multiplication? I bet some of you did. That's right. If I multiply by that same constant on both sides of the equation, that's called the multiplication property of equality. The last one is if A equals B, then A divided by C equals B divided by C, where C does not equal to 0. What do you think this one's called? Do you think this one's called the division property of equality? Yay! Ding, ding, ding! You are right. Look at that last statement where C is not equal to 0. What happens if you divide by 0? Nothing good happens if you divide by 0. Really, it's undefined. And we don't talk about that until later on. So we just know that we can't divide by 0. All right. I have a game for you to play. Maybe you can do some thinking with these properties of equality. Given the following true equation, determine the property of equality being applied. 4 plus 1 is equal to 7 minus 2. Well, the first thing is I'm telling you this is a true equation. Is it true? Remember yesterday we talked about that both sides of the equal sign had to be the same, or that we needed equivalent expressions? Well, what's 4 plus 1? Is it 5? What about 7 minus 2? Wow, that's also 5. So that means this is a true equation. Great. Now that we know it's true, let's look at 4 different equations. if I'm given those 4 different equations, I'm wondering if you can determine what property is being used. So I've given you 4 equations and 4 properties. I want you to pause the video and think about what property goes to which equation. If you are not sure, that's okay. I have an idea. Why don't you scroll back through this video a little bit and look back at our properties of equality? I bet that might help you out. When you're done, unpause and let's talk about it. All right, did you have some fun and think about which one matched? Let's take a look. 4 plus 1 plus 3 equals 7 minus 2 plus 3. It looks like we added 3 to both sides. That's the addition property of equality. What about the next one? 4 plus 1 divided by 2 is equal to the quantity of 7 minus 2 divided by 2. Did you think that was the division property of equality? Great job. 4 plus 1 minus 3 equals 7 minus 2 minus 3. What did we do? We subtracted 3 from both sides. That's the subtraction property of equality. And the last one, 10 times the quantity 4 plus 1, is equal to 10 times the quantity 7 minus 2. What do you think that one is? What operation did we use? Did we use it on both sides so that they're equal? Yep, multiplication property of equality. All right, my friends, I am going to switch over to my document camera now, and we're going to do some work together. So if you just give me a few quick seconds, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to switch to the next slide just so that we're ready to go. And I'm going to escape and move to that camera. I'm also going to make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it. All right, it looks like we need to zoom in on that and focus it in. Awesome, here we go. All right, my friends, let us take a look. We're going to solve the linear equation 2x plus 3 is equal to 4x. All right, well, when we're thinking about this, in the past few days, we've been talking about that left side and that right side. We certainly can do that again if we need to, just to think about it. That highlighter is really just your friend throughout the day if you feel like you need it to see those left and right hand sides. All right, it says to solve this equation for the number x and then to examine the properties of equality. We're going to talk through those properties as we move through. All right, I'm going to rewrite the problem. 2x minus 3 equals 4x. Well, the goal of solving an equation is to have a variable on one side and a constant on the other of that equal sign. So we need to be thinking about how we can transform this equation to get a variable on one side and a constant on the other. Well, currently we have variables on both sides. So I have to move one of them. I need to make a 0 pair in order to do that so I can get rid of it on this side. Let's think about how to do that. So what's the opposite of 2x? Are you thinking negative 2x? Great, so let's do that. 2x minus 2x minus 3 is equal to, well, I subtracted 2x. So that's subtraction. So I have to use my subtraction property of equality and do the exact same thing on the other side. 4x minus 2x minus 3. Notice that on both sides, I have minus 2x. That's that c that we talked about earlier. Does that make sense? All right, so now this made a 0 pair. I'm going to write that this time. I wouldn't always write it, but if you need to do this step, you absolutely can. So 0x minus 3 is equal to, and I'm going to turn this one into a distributive property, 4 minus 2 times x minus 3, so that I can see the coefficient. All right, let's think about this. 0x, well, then I'm just left with negative 3, because anything times 0 is 0, is equal to 4, oh, and I put a minus 3 when I should not have. I apologize, my friends. Okay, so now we have 4 minus 2 times x. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2x. What's the opposite of multiplying by 2x? Are you thinking dividing by 2? You would be right. Sometimes we like to multiply by the reciprocal. That way, whatever's being multiplied just needs to be flipped. Remember the other day when we were talking about reciprocals, when we were writing those mathematical sentences? Remember how we had to flip that fraction over and change the numerator to the denominator and the denominator to the numerator? All right, I'm going to do that now. So the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So that means I'd have to multiply it by 1/2. So 1/2 times 2x. Well, if I multiply this by 1/2, then I have to multiply the other side by 1/2. So 1/2 times -3. What property did I use? I used the multiplication property of equality because I'm multiplying both sides by 1/2. Again, if you take a look, here's the 1/2 and it's on both sides of the equation. 1/2 times -3 is -3/2. That's equal to 1/2 times 2 would be 1, or 1x. Oh good, I have 1x. So I have a variable on one side and I have a constant on the other side. I think I'm set. Do I have to change that -3/2? I really don't. 3/2 is a fraction greater than 1. Forget about that negative for a minute. But 3/2 is a fraction greater than 1. I can just leave it like that. I know for some of us we might want to change it into 1 1/2 or 1 5/10. That's okay. You could do that, but you can also just leave it as 3/2. Especially because we have to check our problem. And sometimes when we have to check our problem, it's easier if we leave it as that fraction. All right, let's do a check. So a check means that we're going to make sure that both sides of the equation come out to the same equivalent answer, right? Remember we did that yesterday. We talked about those true statements on both sides of the equal sign. Well, now we have to take what we learned yesterday and we have to apply it today into our check. So we have 2x minus 3 is equal to 4x. All right, we said x was -3/2. 2 times -3/2 minus 3 is equal to 4 times -3/2. The 2's are going to cancel, and we are going to get -3 minus 3 is equal to 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 2 times -3 is -6. All right, -3 minus 3 is going to be -6 is equal to -6. Are they equivalent expressions? Yes, they are. They're the same. That means we did the problem correctly. That means that x equal to -3/2 is a value that satisfies the equation 2x minus 3 equals 4x. Great job, guys. Let's take a look at another example. Let's take a look at example 2. Example 2 is 3/5 x minus 21 equals 15. We're being asked to solve this. The goal is to transform the equation so that it is in the form of x equal to a constant. So we want this x to stand by itself and a constant on the other side of the equal sign. All right, which properties should we use to help us reach our goal? Well, we should use our properties of equality, right? Those are the ones that we studied earlier today. So we need to move this constant over to the other side. But I can't just move -21. What's the opposite? Are you thinking it's +21? You're correct. So 3/5 x minus 21 plus 21 equals 15. Oh, but I need to use my property of equality for addition. So I need to add 21. And again, look at this. there's a 21 on both sides of the equation. That's why they're still equal. Okay, this turns into a zero pair. So 3/5 x is equal to 38. I'm sorry, 36. Remember when we looked at example 1 and I said to multiply by the reciprocal instead of thinking about that division? This is why that might be important. Here we have 3/5. We need to multiply by the reciprocal of that to turn it into 1. So let's do that. 5/3 times 3/5 x is equal to 36 times 5/3. 5/3 times 3/5 would turn into 1. So we're left with 1x. 3 divides into 36, and it's 12, and 12 times 5 is 60. So x would equal 60. All right, let's do our check. 3/5 x minus 21 equals 15. 3/5 x, so x is 60, minus 21, that should equal 15. That's what we're trying to see if it's true or not. Well, 5 divides into 60 12 times, and 12 times 3 is 36. 36 minus 21 should equal 15. 36 minus 21. Well, that's 15. Does 15 equal 15? Yes, they are the same. Therefore, we know that this is a true statement when x is equal to 60. So 60 satisfies this equation. Are you beginning to see how to do these problems? Some of you might be thinking I've done these in 7th grade. That's awesome. This is kind of a refresher. Some of you are saying, wow, this is the first time I'm kind of seeing this. That's okay too. We're going to do lots of practice with this. All right, let's keep moving. Let's look at example 3 now. Example 3 looks a little bit more challenging, but I bet that we can work our way through it. All right, it says to solve the linear equation 1/5 x plus 13 plus x equals 1 minus 9x plus 22. Okay, that's a lot of information. I need to think about it, and I'm going to make my left-hand side and my right-hand side. So my left-hand side is 1/5 x plus 13 plus x. My right-hand side is 1 minus 9x plus 22. Does that make sense? Perfect. We've been doing this for quite a few days now. All right, now, is there anything we can do with linear expression on the left side to transform it into an expression with fewer terms? All right, so here we have 1/5 x plus 13 plus x, oh, stop, equal sign. Okay, so 1/5 x plus 13 plus x. They're asking us to transform it with fewer terms. Well, if I'm looking at this, I have a 1/5 x and I have an x. Can I combine those? I think I can. All right, I'm going to do an extra step here just so that everybody knows where we're getting these numbers from. 1/5 x plus 13. This is like saying 1x. And another way to write 1 would be 5/5 x. 5/5 x plus 1/5 x would be 6/5 x plus 13. Well, it made it a little bit simpler. I now have a fraction greater than 1, but it's just a coefficient. and I have one variable, and I have one constant. Okay, I've made it into 2 terms instead of 3. Is there anything we can do with the linear expression on the right side to transform it into an expression with fewer terms? All right, well, let's look at our right side. It starts with 1, and it goes all the way over to 22. Okay, 1 minus 9x plus 22. Well, in this one, I have a 1 and I have a 22. 1 plus 22 is 23 minus 9x. Again, we've broken it down and we've transformed it into 2 pieces instead of 3. Now can we rewrite the equation? What should we do now to solve this equation? Okay, we have 6/5 x plus 13 on the left-hand side, and we have 23 minus 9x on the right-hand side. All right, let's think about this. What should we move first? How many of you are thinking that we should move the constants first? Are some of you thinking we should move the variable first? Guess what? You're both correct. Either one would be acceptable. Doesn't make any difference. I'm going to move the constant first, just because I think those numbers might be easier to think about. Really the only reason I'm doing it. I have a 13 and a 23. I'm going to move the 13 over to the 23. Could I have moved the 23 to the 13? I could have. I don't really like working with negatives, so I'm going to try to keep my numbers positive. That's the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, so this is a positive 13. The opposite of positive 13 is negative 13. 6/5 x plus 13 minus 13 is equal to 23. Oh, I subtracted 13 here. That must mean I have to subtract 13 here. That subtraction property of equality. And then we have that minus 9x. All right, now let's think about that for a minute. I'm going to take out that highlighter again just so that you can see it. Notice that we subtracted 13 here and we subtracted 13 here. Notice that property of equality for subtraction because both sides have that negative 13. Okay, so now this would kind of cancel out, right? It would go to 0, and 6/5 x is equal to 10 minus 9x. All right, now I have to think again. If I'm thinking about this, 10 minus 9x, I have a negative 9x. What's the opposite of negative 9x? Are you thinking it's positive 9x? So what would we need to do to make a 0 pair? Negative 9x, positive 9x. If I add 9x to the right-hand side, what do I have to do on the left-hand side? Are you thinking that you have to also add 9x to that side? I think you're right. 9/5 x plus 6/5 x. Let's take our highlighter and make sure that we're correct. We have a 9x on this side and a 9x on that side. Up, we're still equal. We'd use the property of addition, of equality, right? The addition property of equality. All right, so now I have to think about 9x and 6/5 x. Well, let me think about this for a minute. 9x could be thought about as 45/5 because I have 9 5/5. That would be 45 of them. Okay, 45 plus 6 is 51/5 x is equal to 10. All right, let's think about this for a minute. We're multiplying by 51/5. In example 2, do you remember we talked about multiplying by the reciprocal? Can you think of what the reciprocal of 51/5 is? Are you thinking that it's 5/5? Or 5/50? Oh my goodness, 5/51? You're correct. So we need to multiply both sides by 5/51. So the value is 50/51. Can we check our answer? You can. You can put it into the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the equation. I would suggest that you put it into the original equation, because if we made a mistake transforming it, then we wouldn't have the correct answer. So we need to make sure that we always put it into our original equation. I'm going to show you my check that I already did today, only because I don't want to take too much of your time. And we do have to deal with some fractions. So here we go. Here's what the check would look like. 1/5 times 50/51 plus 13 plus 50/51 is equal to 1 minus 9 times 50/51 plus 22. When I multiply, I would get 10/51 plus 13 plus 50/51 is equal to 1 minus 450 over 51 plus 22. That would be 60/51 plus 13 is equal to 23 minus 450/51. And you would end up with a fraction greater than 1 of 723/51 on both sides. Take some time and do it. I just want to move along right now. Okay, now that we've talked about some examples, I want to give you an opportunity to do some problems. Could you please look at exercise 1 and exercise 2 on your student pages that you either printed out or have in your book? Just 1 and 2 to start with. Here are my directions. I would like you to solve these linear equations. Take as much time as you need. You're going to pause the video. You're going to do the work. If you need to scroll back in the video and look again to see how to do something, that's absolutely fine. That's why we have these videos. If you're ready to work, that's great. Do it to it and get it done. When you're finished, unpause the video, come back, and we'll talk about the answers. All right, everybody, I'll see you in a few minutes. Great job, guys. Now let's go through these answers. So in exercise 1, they gave you a number of expressions. Some of you might have wanted to kind of break it up just to think about it. I was thinking as I was doing this math, I think we did this problem yesterday. Not to solve it, maybe it was the day before. It was definitely in this module though. We wrote this equation. We had to take the mathematical sentence and turn it into this equation. That was kind of cool. All right, so in my first step, combined some like terms. I took all my x's, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those, and made it 4x. I then looked at all my constants, 2, 4, and 6, and added those together and got 12. That's still equal to that negative 28. I then wanted to remove the constant from the left side of the equation, so I subtracted 12. Well, if I subtract 12 from one side, what do I have to do? I have to subtract 12 from the other side. That left me with 4x equals negative 40. I then multiplied by the reciprocal. I multiplied by 1/4 on this side and 1/4 on this side, that property of equality of multiplication. Once I did that, x was equal to negative 10. Did some of you take the time to check your work? What I always loved about equations was I knew if I was correct or not. If I took the time to check it, I knew if I was right. Let's think about some main points of the lesson that we did today. So the first one is that we discussed the properties of equality. Remember today that we talked about those 4 properties, and then we played that game where you had to match them? We know that the properties of equality are used to transform equations, and these transformations make equations with fewer terms that are easier to solve. Yes, we definitely saw that, and we worked through. Remember, we took the highlighter so that we could see each of those pieces? I thought that was really helpful today. When solving an equation, we want the answer to be in the form of a symbol x equal to a constant. That's right. We always want the symbol x, or whatever variable we're working with, to equal a single number, a constant. That way we know we're done. Okay, just so that you have it, on your hard copy, you'll see this lesson summary. It gives you all those properties of equality. You can review them and use them to help you solve equations. You also have a problem set to continue working on if you need more practice. Thank you so much for meeting with me today. I was so excited to have you in my virtual classroom. I will see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a wonderful day.
This is MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23. Here's what's coming up next.
Good morning, I'm Micah Nelson. I'm the assistant principal at the Butler Lab School 60. And this morning we're going to go over the reading part of the 8th grade home learning packet. We're going to focus on lessons 1 through 4. So you're going to need your packet and a writing utensil. If you need to go get those, go do that right now. We're going to cover pages 11 through 19. Lessons 1 and 2 go together and they talk about verb moods. Lessons 3 and 4 go together, and they are all about summarizing a text. So we're going to start with verb moods this morning. And on this chart are the 5 different verb moods that you will also see listed in your packet on page 11. I'm going to go over those really quickly, and then we're going to talk about how you use them and why you use them. So you might be thinking about, why do I need to know this? Why does this matter? And so this is really important for when you are writing. So you want to make sure that your verb moods agree, and then later we're going to talk about we need your verb moods to always agree, but also your verb tenses. So that's why it's important. So next time you're writing and you're editing and revising your work, you're going to want to refer back to these notes. I don't expect you to memorize these, but you just need to understand why it's important. So the first verb mood is called indicative. And that is a verb that expresses a fact or an opinion. So the example in the packet is the election will be on Tuesday. So that is indicative. And then there is an imperative verb mood. Gives a command, omitting or leaving out the subject. So an imperative is a command. So that an example would be remember to vote. So that's me telling you to remember to vote. So I don't say you remember to vote, I can just say remember to vote. Interrogative is the next one, and you can remember this by associating it with an interrogation. So that means it's asking a question. Just like an interrogation, you're asking questions. So an example will be, have you met all of the candidates? Any question is an interrogative. And then there's conditional, which is expressed as a possibility or an uncertainty, often using could, should, or might. An example of that would be, Kim would make an excellent president. Subjunctive is the final verb mood. It expresses something contrary to fact or makes a suggestion using the term that. So an example for that would be, I wish Tyler were a candidate. I recommend that you vote for Kim. Okay? So on this chart, I have double underlined the clues that you can look for when you're trying to figure out which kind of verb mood a sentence is using. So fact or opinion, indicative. Is it a command? Imperative. Is it a question? Interrogative. Does it use could, should, or might? It's conditional. Does it use that? Then it's subjunctive. Subjunctive. So that is something that, those are the key things that you can look for. So we're going to move on to the guided practice, which is at the bottom of page 11. And I have the examples written up here. So we want to make sure that we understand the different kinds of verb moods. So I have a certain example written down, and we're going to be asked to change it into another example. So the first example is, if it is not too late, I will vote. So we want to change that into subjunctive and conditional, and there's a hint here that says you can combine a subordinate clause that is subjunctive with a main clause that is conditional. So to correct that sentence to make it subjunctive and conditional, we're going to say, if it were not too late, I would vote. So you're going to want to write that for number 1 on the guided practice. The next question is, the next sentence is a question. Will you vote for Harry for president? So as it's written, that's an interrogative, but the packet is telling us to write it as an imperative, which is a command. So in order to turn this question into a command, we're going to say, vote for Harry for president. Number 3 says, he commands the stage like a movie star. But we want to turn that into subjunctive using as if. So to do that, we can say he commands the stage as if he were a movie star. So make sure you write that down for number 3. So number 4 says, Harry would be an excellent president. And as it's written, that's a conditional statement. But we want to turn it into an indicative statement by saying Harry will be an excellent president. And that's how you change verb moods. So when you use a different mood of verb, you're changing the tone of the sentence. And that's what's key to remember here, okay? So now we're going to move on to page 12 in your packet. And page 12 talks about, it's page 13. Page 12 is the independent practice that you're going to do on your own. Page 13 in your packet talks about shifts in voice and mood. Okay? So we have some rules because your voice and your mood in your sentences have to match. So for instance, one rule is avoid changing from a passive voice to an active voice and vice versa. So a bad example would be the Carolina Ballet Theater was created in 1972 and its founder designed it to be a permanent dance company. That's the example in your packet. But we don't want to write a sentence like this because you're using a passive verb here and an active verb there. So instead, you should write the Carolina Ballet Theater was created in 1972 and it was designed by its founder to be a permanent fixture. And in this case, both verb phrases agree. They're both passive. So that's a good example. The same thing goes from verb mood. You want to avoid changing from one verb mood to another. So a bad example would be, go to the website and you will read more about the company. But that doesn't match because go is imperative and will read is indicative. You should say, go to the website and read more about the company. And in this case, both verbs are imperative and they match, so that's a good sentence. So we're going to practice that together. We have 2 examples that we're going to look at because we're going to want to think about verb mood and verb voice. So when we look at these examples, these are the 2 guided practice examples on page 13, numbers 1 and 2. The first sentence says the Carolina Ballet Theater employs 10 dancers and each dancer would be uniquely talented. So let's think about what in this sentence doesn't match. So we've got our verbs. It employs 10 dancers, and each dancer would be uniquely talented. But those don't match. So we have to figure out how to make them match. In order to make this a correct sentence, we instead of would be we would say is. Each dancer is uniquely talented. The second example is watch them perform and you will learn more about ballet. So we've got watch them, which is an imperative, and you will learn. Those don't match. So the sentence should say, watch them perform. We're going to take out all of this. Watch them perform and learn more about ballet. So now you've written a sentence that matches. We're going to take a pause while I switch the board for lessons 3 and 4.
This is MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23. Here's what's coming up next.
All right, we are ready for lessons 3 and 4, which are pages 15 to 19. We're going to start on page 15 of your packet. So we're going to talk about summarizing a text today. And summarizing a text is important, A, when you want to retell someone else about something that you've read, but B, also because good readers constantly summarize what they're reading as they go. And that's a really important skill. So we're going to talk about what it makes up a summary. We're going to read some passages and identify what we want to summarize, and then we're going to look at some examples of good and bad summaries. So to summarize a text, you're going to briefly retell the main characters, the setting, conflict, and important events. And it needs to be objective, and being objective means you leave out your opinions. So you're not writing a review of what you've read, you're just telling a summary. So if you turn now to page 16, we're going to read Touchdown on Spectra Omicron 8. Now, this is a sci-fi story, so it's about outer space and some things that could happen in the future. So starting at the top of page 16, it says, this just in, the UFP Ulysses vessel has touched down on the planet Spectra 8. This signifies the first stage in its terraforming expedition. The complex multi-stage terraforming process will make Spectra's atmosphere more like that of Earth and livable for humans. Captain Jane Young and her crew of 21 blasted off in May of 2218 for a 6-year journey through deep space to reach the lifeless planet. They encountered a number of problems along the way. First, they were stuck in the gravitational pull of an antimatter black hole. They also had to deal with a salmonella outbreak on the ship's food storage. In October of this year, Ulysses established orbit. Lieutenant Bobby Sullivan piloted the vessel towards the planet's surface. He set the angle of entry so the ship would not burn up when passing through the atmosphere. After securing visual confirmation of the landing site, Sullivan deployed the landing gear, applied the thrusters, and brought the ship in for a soft 3-point landing. So we want to think that, remembering that a summary talks about main characters, setting, conflict, and important events. We're going to take a minute to identify what those are in this particular story. So for main characters, as we read that passage, we know there's Jane Young, who's the captain of the ship. We know that she has a crew on board. And we know that there's also Lieutenant Bobby Sullivan. Those are our main characters. We also want to think about setting. So there's 2 different settings in this particular passage. There's deep space, where they spend time on the ship. And then there's also the planet itself, which is Spectra 8. And then we want to think about important events. So sometimes we get caught up in details of stories, but this time we want to think about what are those really important events. So we know that they are traveling to the planet. Okay. We know that they have problems along the way. Right, so they dealt with gravitational pull of a black hole and a salmonella outbreak. Salmonella is a nasty bacteria that gets in your food. If you eat it, you'll get sick. So that's a really big problem on that ship. And then, in the end, they have a safe landing. So if you were to be working on this alone, when you read a passage on your own, you're going to want to be thinking through these things on your head. You may want to write them down, but you can also just keep track of them in your head. So let's look at this brief summary that I have written down over here. So this is a summary of the passage we just read, but there's some problems with it. So we're going to want to think about what are the problems. So I'm going to read it to you. You can also read it in your packet. In the year 2218, the Ulysses sets off on a really dangerous mission to begin the terraforming of planet Spectra 8. They have to deal with some scary problems along the way, but they finally reach the planet. The most interesting part is how pilot Bobby Sullivan brings the ship in for a safe landing. So this summary includes our main characters, it includes the setting, and it includes some important events. But it also includes lots of opinions that we want to remove when we're talking about a summary. So again, this isn't a review of the story. This is just a summary. So you're going to underline in your packet, where do we see opinions? So really dangerous is an opinion. Also, scary problems is an opinion. And then talking about the most interesting part of the story is an opinion. So I want you to take a minute when you're working on your own to rewrite this summary that would take out any opinions and make it just an objective summary. Turning to page 17, we're going to continue reading about this story. Now, at the top of the page, now that Ulysses has landed, it's time for Young and her team to begin exploring the planet's surface. Spectra Omicron 8 is a little more than loose rocks of red clay. One of Captain Young's top priorities is establishing the Ulysses base camp with its many domed sections. With so much carbon monoxide in the atmosphere, oxygen corridors must be built to connect domes, which will be used for farming, geological research, and communications. A molten carbon drill will then be constructed at the camp center to burrow through the planet's core, carrying the terraforming unit that will aid in surface reconstruction. So there's a lot that's talked about in that paragraph. There's a lot of details that you need to kind of wade through. So looking at the question underneath the passage, it says, what's the best summary of this portion of text? So take a minute to read through those answers. What is the best summary for this portion of the text? And the answer is option A. Captain Young explores the planet's surface and begins building the base camp. The reason that that's the correct answer is because that just tells the summary of the passage without any extra details and without any opinions. Options B, C, and D either include extra details that we don't need or opinions about the text. All right, moving on to page 18, we're going to read another passage, okay? And as we're reading, I want you to think about in your head, who are the main characters, what is the setting, and what are some of the most important events? You can mark right on this paper if you see any of those things. Main characters, setting, and important events. Today I had a fascinating meeting with a promising new captain by the name of Elia. The first thing I noticed about her was the remarkable hue of her purple eyes, much more vibrant than the rest of ours. At any rate, she relayed to me how her crew had recently returned from a mission to the third planet from the central star, where they had an encounter with one of the dominant life forms. I inquired as to the extent of the creature's technology, and Elia replied that they had advanced machines, but preferred to let their servants operate them. I think in myself as a reader, that's interesting. I wonder what that means. These servants live with them. In fact, there are often several servants in each home. They walk about on 2 legs, prepare food, and feed their 4-legged masters. That's going to be a clue that we need to think about. What does that mean? How does that relate to this story? Elia then told me that a member of this alien race had returned with them on their ship. Of course, I asked to see the creature straight away, and when it was brought to my throne room, I was taken with how friendly it appeared, inviting but cautious. It had wide green eyes that were alert and confident, but, dare I say, bored? Since it was a very short and very furry sort of alien, I laid down on the floor to establish better verbal communication with it. I welcomed it to Harlepan, the home of the Galactic Confederacy. The creature stretched out on its front legs and appeared to bow. I distinctly heard an odd purring coming from it, a form of telepathic language it shares with its species, perhaps? Meow, it said with great dignity before turning to the task of licking its paws. Fascinating. So that story, again, is a sci-fi story, would fall in that genre. And if you notice at the top of the passage, it says, Imperator's Log, the 36th of Quelnar, 4278. So that gives us a clue that we're reading somebody's journal, or maybe like a diary entry. So the narrator, the person who's talking in this story, is the Imperator, which to me, based on the story, kind of sounds like maybe like an emperor or the queen. So we're going to think through now, in this story called Prime Contact, who are our main characters? So we know that there's the Imperator, the narrator. We don't know her name, but we do know her title, okay? We also know there's Elia, the person who traveled to another planet, which in the story is called the 3rd planet from the central star, so be thinking about that. And we also have the alien life form, who we know in the end of the story turns out to be a cat. Okay. Those are the main characters. You could also add servants that they would mention, and that would mean humans. So in the story, the 2-legged servants that prepare food and feed the 4-legged masters would be the humans. Okay, the setting, we have the 3rd planet from the central star, which if you remember from your astronomy classes, that would be the Earth, right? Because we're the 3rd planet from the sun. Mercury, Venus, Earth. So then we also have the planet that they live on, which is Harlepan. You could also add the ship if you wanted to, but most of the story happens on those 2 places. And then we're going to talk about important events. So we know that, first of all, Elia travels to the new planet, which is Earth. And observes life forms. Okay, brings alien back on her ship. The Imperator meets the alien, and we realize the alien is a cat. So when you're thinking about summarizing that text that we read, these are the important the things that you need to remember. So why don't you go back in the passage and circle or underline where you see these things? Okay? So again, important events. Elia travels to a new planet, and observes life forms. She brings back the alien on her ship. The Imperator meets the alien, and the alien is a cat. There are lots of other details in this story, and the details are what makes a story interesting to read, right? Or gives us some more information, adds color to what we're reading. But when we're thinking about important events, we don't want to be talking about details. So like the fact that her eyes are purple, we don't need that. Or the fact that the servants are making the four-legged masters their food, we don't necessarily need that. But these are the important events. So we're going to talk about the guided practice now on page 19 in your packet. So we're going to keep this chart up here because it's going to help us remember. I'm just going to move it over. We're going to just do number 1 together. So number 1 says, which of the following would you include in a summary of prime contact? Remember, in a summary, we want to include main characters, setting, and important events. So letter A says, it's very funny that the imperator doesn't realize it's a cat. Letter B says, the imperator of Harlepan asks to meet the alien that has returned with Elia. C, the alien loses interest in the imperator and starts licking its paws. Or D, the imperator is fascinated by Elia's remarkable purple eyes. So thinking about these options, which one tells part of the either important events or main characters or setting, and it leaves out an opinion. So we can take out letter A because the fact that it says it's funny is an opinion, okay? That's an opinion. So we know it's not going to be A. With D, we already talked about how that's a detail that's interesting in the story, but it doesn't help us with the summary. So then we can look at B and C and think about which one really just describes one of the important events in the story. So when we think about the passage, letter B tells us an important event in the story because that's how we figure out that it's the cat. So the answer would be letter B. The imperator of Harlepan asks to meet the alien that has returned with Elia. And we wrote that here, right? The imperator meets the alien. So that's why letter B is the answer. You can go ahead and think through questions 2 and 3 on your own. Question 3 is an interesting one because it talks about the order in which events happen. Now remember, sometimes in a story, the narrator tells the events in a different order than they actually happened. So this question is asking you to arrange the events as they occur in the passage. So you're going to have to do that on your own, but refer back to the story to get your answers. Once you've done that, you're going to be ready to move on to part 5 on pages 20 and 22 on your own. So remember to pause when you're reading, to summarize in your head or mark on your paper the main characters, the setting, and the important events so that you're ready to write your summary when you're finished reading. Have a great day, you guys. We all miss you very much, and we can't wait to see you again when we're all back together.
Look around. Listen. We're moving to a new beat. A colorful symphony, each note made more beautiful by the next. We are driven by talent in the classroom, in each school, that recognizes the potential in every student and knows the opportunity to achieve is not an option, it's expected. We are not alone. We stand among giants, eager to help, eager to give back and build bonds to last generations. We are part of a city fueled by grit, strength, and determination. Racing toward a future full of potential, where hard work really does pay off. When one succeeds, we all succeed. We're innovative, we're industrious, we're imaginative. We are your Indianapolis Public Schools, and we're stronger together.
For as long as we've existed, Boys and Girls Clubs has always been about coming together to support the families of our communities and do whatever it takes to give every kid a chance at a great future. But we're going through a challenging time right now. And while we may not all be able to come together in the same physical ways, in other ways, we're coming together like never before. Because that's what whatever it takes to build great futures means. It means providing a safe place to go for children whose parents are on the front lines battling the virus. It means providing millions of meals for kids who previously relied on their school or a meal program, which are now shut down. And it's about harnessing the power of technology to keep kids moving forward with their education. So yeah, Whatever it takes to build great futures may mean something different right now. But whatever it is, that's exactly what we're going to keep doing.
You're watching MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23, a free educational service provided by Circle City Broadcasting of Indianapolis. Here's what's coming up this hour. Get more information, special announcements, and weekly program schedules online at wishtv.com. And be sure to follow us on Facebook. Here's what's coming up next.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Hutchins. I am the visual arts teacher at Harshman Magnet Middle School. I teach 7th and 8th grade. Today, I'm going to be here to talk to you about having a visual journal for a day. So, on day 4 of your home learning program, they would like for you to keep a visual journal. So what you can do is you can find paper around your house if you don't have a sketchbook. Not many of us probably have readily available sketchbooks. So I grabbed some copy paper, or you can rip some paper out of notebooks. It can have lines on it. It doesn't have to be blank. You can keep it big like this. If you have a stapler, staple. If you don't need to staple. This is just for you. This is your journal. It's nobody else's. It doesn't need to be perfect. Or if you would like to, fold it in half, and that could be a journal as well. I have a pen, a marker, some crayons. If you have a pencil, that would be excellent. So what you're going to do is, what I like to do is I like to just find objects. I start with objects that I would like to sketch. Something that I immediately sketch is like a coffee mug. So I would find a coffee mug and I would put it in front of me and I would sit at my kitchen table and I would draw my coffee mug. I don't have a coffee mug in front of me at this moment, but I can kind of remember what it would look like, and I'm just going to kind of start drawing, sketching out what I would start with the top. And I would just do a simple elliptical shape. Another great thing about sketch journals is you don't really have to draw what you see. You can just doodle. And doodling is a great therapy. It's a great thing to do to kind of shut off your brain, shut out the world around you, and just kind of think about fun little doodles, fun little ideas that you want to draw. You could combine a little bit of observational drawing and doodling. There is no right or wrong answer. It's about you. It's about what makes you feel good, what makes you feel relaxed, giving you some time to have a peace of mind. So I've kind of started out with my simple coffee mug shape. Maybe I would focus on the shadows, the darks and lights, if that's what I want to practice doing. If you're using a pen, you can kind of practice your different marks. There's cross-hatching, hatching, stippling, and scribble. Those are all 4 ways that you can use to shade in your work if you want to do that. Also, I'm a sketcher. I like sketching. I like making multiple lines. Some of my artists that I've had in class, they like making one firm line. Totally fine. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of keep scribbling, keep kind of shaping what I would draw. And then what I would also do, because this is a journal, is I would date and time. I would put the date, which is May, whatever day, and then I would put the time that I drew this. And that would be a visual journal. And when you would look at that, maybe you would be able to go back and reflect and think about what you were thinking at that time, what you were doing, what made you draw that, and it would just maybe make you think of a happy thought, take you back to that moment. So, as I do my journal, I would keep it together. Maybe I would make a fun title page, so I would keep the page in the front, and I would maybe put like a fun title or a picture, and that would be my journal. So that's a quick lesson you can do for the day to kind of help you take a time out, relax, take a break, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson as much as I did. Thank you.
This is MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23. Here's what's coming up next.
Hi, my name is Mrs. Hutchins. I am the visual arts teacher at Harshman Magnet Middle School. I teach 7th and 8th grade. Today we will be doing the lesson for the home learning program on day 6. The title of this lesson is A Picture is Worth 1,000 Words. Your assignment for this lesson is to find images throughout your house that would be located in magazines, old pictures that maybe your parents won't mind if you cut up, and newspapers, or you can even, if you have a printer at home, you could print off images from online that you have Googled and want to add to your poster. So the assignment is that you will be gathering images. You want to find something that is big that you can glue the images down to. Not a lot of you might have posters readily available at home. I did not have a poster at home. I used a piece of cardboard that I was able to find, and I cut it to the desired size that I wanted. And so if you do not have a poster, don't feel bad about that. Just find something that would work. So today we are going to discuss how we would put these images onto a piece of paper that would look aesthetically pleasing. This is called a collage. So there are two different types of collages. There's a collage that a lot of you have probably made in elementary school about your interests and your likes, and that's cutting out basic pictures that are about you or things that you like to do. And that's somewhat similar to this, but it's more abstract than that. They want you to have images of like everyday life, maybe experiences, maybe things that you miss because you've been home. So don't get too caught up in the idea that this has to be reflective of who you are. The next kind of collage is, a different kind of collage is something where you come up with different images that create a new image. You don't necessarily have to do that today, but if you would like to do that, that's completely fine. A couple of collage artists that you can look at for examples if you are able to look up things on the internet. Well, one that comes to mind is Romir Bearden. He is a very popular collage artist, an assemblagist, and he was very active during the civil rights movement. He did fabulous collages of different kind of themes throughout his life. So he would be a good artist to look up to get an example of different kinds of collages. So what you're going to need for this assignment is a basic poster or piece of paper of a larger size like this, and then you're going to probably want to find some magazines. I have these, preferably ones with a lot of pictures, so that's what I've tried to gather. I also have got scissors, so scissors are definitely needed, and a glue stick. I would prefer a glue stick to Elmer's glue. Elmer's glue gets, with especially thin magazine papers, it gets kind of liquidy and can often rip the paper as you try to apply it to your poster. So a glue stick would be great, but if you have Elmer's glue, that's fine too. I like to dump the Elmer's glue out, get a little like something that you can throw away and maybe a Q-tip, and then use the Q-tip to apply the glue that way, because it's not so much, you can control the amount of glue that you're putting on your piece of paper. I also got markers and crayons, even though the assignment did not call for them. I like to add a little bit of extra color sometimes. Maybe if I want to fill up some spaces that I couldn't necessarily fill with a picture, I like to kind of, use designs. So the one rule for this lesson was that it said no words, which was really hard for me because I love writing words. So it was hard for me to just focus on the image and kind of leave the image up to interpretation instead of having words kind of direct the viewer to an idea or a thought that the artist was thinking at the time of creation. So back to what we need. So I've already kind of ripped out some pictures from the magazines that I thought would be good background pieces. So as you see, you have a huge area that we need to fill. So I like to separate images that are going to be good background, kind of like filler pieces, and then I like to get images that are maybe medium and small sizes that are going to go on top. So you want to work from the back up. So you want to pick the pictures that are bigger, that you really like, that you don't really want to cut up. Like I didn't really want to cut this one up because it's got a lot of nice things. So now I'm going to decide where I would want to put this. And sometimes it would be great to not glue things down right away so you can kind of get an idea of what you want to put and where you want to put it. So you kind of lay it out and see where you like things. So as you do that, see, even though it says no words, I liked this because I liked that the words were small enough. But so you're not going to get tied into what the words are saying, but it makes for a good background filler. So I'm just kind of laying things out, mapping them out. I forget whose this name is. Michael Strathen. Put him on there. I like his face. So we'll put him up there. He's kind of big. His face is, the picture's big. So I kind of like the feel of this. I've got some white spaces still, so I'm going to start gluing them down. So I'm going to work with this one first at the bottom. So I'll slightly move this one to the side. And I'm going to glue. I like to run the glue kind of like a picture frame along the edges. And then I like to go and make a big X down in the middle. X marks the spot. So, see, and my paper is already, because magazine paper can be kind of thin, you want to be careful that you're not applying too much pressure because you will rip your paper, and if I know from my years of teaching how many kids get really upset when they rip their paper and freak out. So we don't want that to happen. There's enough going on in life that we don't need to be freaking out about ripped paper. Okay, so I have that down. Then now I'm going to do, I guess I'll do the words up here because I'm going to put this guy on top of that one. So then I'm going to glue, again, a big frame or a big square, kind of outlining the page, and then another X marks the spot. So as you do this, you can kind of think of ideas or themes or some kind of message that you want people to think when they walk by your artwork, because the interpretation is up to the viewer, but you can obviously like have a message or a theme that you want to kind of get across. This magazine paper is really nice. It's one of those thicker pieces of magazine. Makes life a lot easier for collaging. So I've got that. I want to kind of line it up, see if it's going to be straight. Press down. And then we'll put Michael at the top, right here. I like that. So it's a lot of eyeballing. It's kind of a lot of feeling your way through, seeing what looks good compositionally. Compositionally is a big word. Compositionally is your whole picture is your composition. So when I say compositionally or talk about your composition, I'm talking about everything and how it looks in the space that you have for your work. So that's what compositionally means. Now that I've got my bigger pieces kind of on the paper, I'll go ahead and show you. This is kind of what I'm working with as far as my background. Okay, I don't really know what kind of message I have yet, but the reason why I picked Some of these, I really liked the nature in this one. I really liked the graphic design of the airplanes kind of forming an arrow. And then I liked this portrait. I liked the coloring, the center on his face. I just had a lot of, these are the things that I liked about it. So, but now we're probably going to cover some of this up because I've got medium-sized pieces that I'm going to get to. So, let's see. I have a horse that I picked because I like horses. I like animals. So let's see where he will go. Maybe he'll go right here. And then I have ice cream because who doesn't love ice cream? Actually, some people don't like ice cream. That's pretty common. But where will he go? The ice cream's kind of big. It's a big bowl of ice cream. Ooh, what if we put it like right there, right by Michael's face? That might be fun. I've got a dancer, kind of doing a fun dance. So she will go maybe down here. And what's great is you can kind of maybe angle them. They don't necessarily have to be straight up and down, or it doesn't necessarily have to make sense at all. So it's kind of, that's what's great about collages, and the word abstract means that it doesn't have to have like an objective image. Abstract is a wider idea of art. It has multiple interpretations. So there's no objective image that you're going to be able to look at this and say it is this. So I've got a woman working out because, you know, that's good, I guess, to work out. And then I got Joe Biden. I got this from the New York Times, and it says he'll do. It's about current events, so that's part of it, demonstrating your ability to apply current events, things that are happening in your life, that are happening in society. So maybe we'll move my dancer and put Joe Biden down here, and we'll put my dancer somewhere else, but I don't want to cover. So this is the kind of the big puzzle that is the collage. So let's see, where should she go? I don't know. Maybe she'll go up here, but we won't block Michael's face. So now that I've got this kind of laid out, these are my medium pieces, I'll go ahead and start gluing those down. This is the part of the segment where I would ask, are there any questions? But you can't ask me questions, so we will just keep going. So again, I'm just kind of making sure I'm applying glue pretty evenly over all of the pieces, especially now that I've cut out these more finer shapes. I'm trying to get all the little pieces so they don't flap up. And then I smooth out, and the way that I smooth out is I usually come from the middle out, and that kind of tries to prevent any wrinkling, but wrinkling happens, and it is what it is, and just move forward. Don't get too caught up in the wrinkles. Some kids do, though. They get stressed out about those wrinkles. You can always let the wrinkles become part of the overall feeling of the work, the texture that is part of your composition. You don't have to get too caught up in it being super perfect. So we'll do Joe, glue Joe down. I did my big square. I'm doing my X marks the spot. The other thing that I like to do when I'm doing collages is making sure that I'm doing a good amount of overlapping. So overlapping is when you have an image on top of an image on top of an image, and I try to think about what exactly I still want to be shown through without taking away too much of the picture behind. And then, so placement of the pieces are really important. It's not kind of this, oh, just throw images wherever you want to throw them. You kind of want to see where it looks, where it's going to look the best. I like to cover up corners sometimes, just to make things seem more smoother. And then again with the dancer, she's more cut out, she's a more detailed cutout. I'm gluing on top of my artwork, which you shouldn't do. You should glue to the side, because in case that you go over with the glue, you don't want the glue to get on what you're already doing. So Put that down. She's gonna hang off. Oop, oop, oop. See if we can pull her off gently. Move her over a little bit. She's gonna be a little bit there. So this is my second layer of images, and I'll pull it up. So now I have kind of different things that I liked stylistically, or maybe I liked them because of what they were. And now I have some spaces that I can fill up with smaller pictures, or I can take my markers. I kind of thought maybe I would circle some words with a marker in the words, even though I'm not supposed to be really writing anything, but maybe I could circle like certain words that pop out to me. That would be fun to do if you wanted to do that in your work. So now that I ran out of images, I need to start going through magazines and find fun images. So what I do when I go through magazines is I don't want to get too caught up in a certain image, because you'll be looking forever. So I kind of just go through and I just pull out things that I think that are colorful or bright, or just catch my eye immediately, and I pull them out and I just kind of set them aside. So I don't want to worry about cutting them out yet. I just kind of go through and I think, oh, this is a cool picture. Let me just rip this page out and set it aside. And that way, the process, you're not getting too caught up in looking for a certain thing. Keep your mind, keep your idea of what you want open and big and broad, because you don't know yet until you find it sometimes. So that's what I like to do. And as I do this, maybe I'll move on to the next one. This one might be fun. So if your parents get different kind of catalogs, maybe they get clothing catalogs, maybe they get magazines. Like my mother gets the People magazine, and she always brings that to me. She likes that, but that has a lot of good material. Any kind of magazine really is a good place, except maybe furniture. That one's not good. Let's see. The New York Times is not great. Why did I grab these? Let's see. So, as you do this, let's do this one. Okay, so I've got some few more images that I can cut out. And we'll talk about cutting out, because that can also be stressful. I have some nice big scissors, and what I do when I cut things out is I go in and I just kind of do like a nice, easy, not very detailed cut around the image that I want. Then I go ahead and I go back in for the more detailed cut. And when I do that, I don't try to cut out every little single, like all the way around. I've watched it year after year, kids getting wrapped up in that, and they lose interest. I like to do like a minimal border around the image. Nice clean one, nice clean lines, keeps it easy, still looks clean, still looks nice, and it doesn't, for my perfectionists out there, they can still feel proud of their work, and they don't get caught up with the idea that it's not good enough. So once I do that, I just kind of cut around, and as I'm doing that, I'm cutting off my scraps, and I kind of leave them in a pile just to keep things neat, tidy. Your workspace, your work area is organized, because some of my students are very organized, and I know they care about that. So I go up, I'm almost done. I'm just going to cut the inside here, and then I'm going to try to figure out where I would place him on my paper. It's Donald Trump. So where should we put Donald Trump? Maybe we should put him up on top of the ice cream. See, this is also what's fun about collages, is you can kind of have a message, and only you really know, unless you tell somebody what you want it to mean. Okay, so Annie's walking on ice cream, and ice cream melts. So what's that interpretation? I don't know. Sorry. So let's see. All right, I kind of feel like my collage is pretty full. I might take my marker and outline some things. I like to outline things. It makes things pop. So that's what I like to do. And when I do that, I like to keep a space between what I'm outlining and the marker line. And that is called positive and negative space, or white space. And that is another element of art that is used by most artists to kind of achieve a very aesthetic and clean and interesting look. So I'm kind of going to rotate my colors, kind of like what I did back here. I did the rainbow. I just did red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and I repeated that over and over and over, and it kind of filled in my space. On this one, I went in with the idea that I had my woman that I really wanted to use. I found an image, it kind of led me in a certain direction, and I gave her a thought, and I wanted her to have this thought. And then all the images that I cut out, I thought, would be maybe things that she was thinking about. So if you want to go with that direction and have like an idea in mind, that's fine. This I kind of went in more spontaneously. But I found things that I thought were all things that she could be thinking about. So I did that. So I liked the design factor. I think it makes it kind of interesting. It gives it movement. The lines kind of lead you to look at her. She's obviously the focal point. And so you can use that as well. So I'm going to do that over here. I'm going to outline around just in these spaces that are kind of white and they're empty. And the way that I do that is I just kind of follow along the line and I pick up my marker. If I come into contact, it's up to you actually. I actually might just draw on the paper. That might also be interesting. So what I'm doing here is I'm just outlining the edges of the magazine and the horse. What I was contemplating was, do I draw on the magazine or do I stop my marker and pick back up where it dropped? So I decided I'm going to actually keep drawing on the magazine and see how that looks. I think that will give it kind of an interesting thing happening. So that is what I'm currently doing. And again, I'm just controlling my wrist, taking my time. I'm not going too fast because I want to have like an even space between my marker lines. And if I go too quick, sometimes they can get close and it might not be what you are wanting. Might not look as nice or as neat as you want it to look. I'm left-handed, so what just happened is I couldn't see where my marker was going, so I'm going to have to rotate and start on the other side, which is okay. Sometimes that happens. You want to make sure that when you're doing your artwork, you're constantly looking for if there are problems, you're constantly looking for the solution and not getting frustrated and giving up. So let's go to the next color. I like the idea where now that I'm drawing on my magazine, I think it is really cool. So if you don't have a set of permanent markers, the Crayola markers might work. The glossy paper with Crayola markers probably won't work very well because they'll probably just like glide right off. So maybe it won't work for you. You can use crayons or colored pencils if you want to add designs. That might work better. So I have this going on here, and I can keep going on that side, and I think it looks pretty cool. So that's what I have going on right over there that I've kind of added to this extra part of my work. And I will probably just keep doing that on the edges. And I might even do some marker in my images. All right, I've kind of gotten to a good stopping place. I'm going to keep going, probably with my markers up here and on the sides. But I think we're at a good place, and I think you have a good idea of what you could be doing at home. Again, It's just about finding things around your house that you can use to create artwork, that you can cut images out. Please, please, please ask your parents before you cut anything out. I don't want you to get in trouble. And this is about fun, and it's relaxing, and it's meditative. Don't feel like you're not doing it right, because honestly, there is no wrong answer when it comes to art, and that's why I love art. So again, my name is Mrs. Hutchins, and thank you for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did.
This is MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23. Here's what's coming up next.
Good morning, IPS. My name is Mr. Melrose. I'm a teacher at Northwest Middle School. Go Pioneers! And I'm here to teach all the 7th graders here about activism in your local community. So, what is activism anyways? Oh, come on. Activism is people who work towards changing something they see wrong in society. There are many causes that you could be an activist towards. Many people believe in political activism, but today we're going to be focusing on climate change activism. So what is climate change? Climate change is always happening, right? It is significant and long-lasting change in the Earth's climate and weather patterns. The weather changes every day, and the climate shifts according to your geographical region. However, scientists argue that our impact on climate change has significantly grown due to our dumping of pollution, the use of fossil fuels, as well as our lack of sustainable practices. So, when we look at the Earth here, we have to realize that we're encapsulated in our atmosphere. Inside our atmosphere, we have a lot of really wonderful things going on, but what we don't realize is the Earth is a living thing. All the gases that are being produced here when we make our oil, when we mine for coal, anytime you plug in your toaster to make toast with your morning breakfast, we're using electricity. But where does that electricity come from? Unless you're using green practices to make sure that that is sustainably forged, we are using some sort of energy source. And unfortunately, those are finite resources. So, as soon as we've dug up all the coal we can, drilled all the oil we can, eventually the waste from that product needs to go somewhere. And right now, it's trapped in our atmosphere. The smog that you're breathing in is affecting our health. The pollution that we have to dump into our oceans and into our land is harming our environment. And this is causing our animals to be disrupted. This is causing our food supply to be limited. And this is causing our water to be contaminated. I'm sure all of you have heard of global warming. I, for one, could agree that we all love a nice summery hot day, but imagine if the entire world's temperature rises. Well, not only does this lead to raising sea levels, which your vacation in Miami won't be as fun if in the next 50 to 100 years it's underwater, as well as our fresh water reserves are running out. And I sure know on a hot summer day you need a tall glass of water. So, many young people today have picked climate change as their topic within activism. There's one person in particular that we want to look towards. Greta Thunberg is a 16-year-old Swedish activist. She named climate change as the most important topic for people to take seriously today. And one of her quotes is, "You are never too small to make a difference." Greta Thunberg shocked the world at the UN Climate Change Summit when she commanded that the people don't listen to her, but they listen to the scientists. This is a drastic cause that if people do not seriously consider and take definitive action to stop climate change, the effects will be irreversible. Her speech has become viral, and people have celebrated her, Time naming her Person of the Year, and she was nominated for 2 Nobel Peace Prizes. She led youth climate strikes all over the world. On January 28th, 1,100 different climate strikes took place. and these were largely organized by the youth, like you. In Indianapolis, as a matter of fact, there were climate strikes that took place in the State House. People from all over the state came into the State House and they demanded that our legislature take definitive actions to lessen or stop their effect in climate change. Here we see some pictures from Climate Action Day. This was in Indianapolis. So people in our own backyard are taking climate change seriously. So what can you do to stop climate change? Maybe it might be as small as recycling or using less water, maybe when you brush your teeth. Maybe you buy secondhand clothes in order to lower the fuel and resources needed to transport those clothes. Maybe we support local agriculture farms in order to not have to ship our food from all over the world. There are many different practices that you and your family can do to support a more green lifestyle, but we're going to highlight a few just here in a little bit. 2 local organizations you might want to consider supporting is Keep Indianapolis Beautiful, as well as the Flanner House. The Flanner House is an amazing local urban farm and child care center that's one of the oldest in the country. The Flanner House on the west side of Indianapolis has their own urban farm, and they also have a local grocery store that you can buy all your food from. This is all locally sourced. It's an amazing resource for our community, and I highly suggest checking it out if you haven't. Now I'd like to transition to reading one of my favorite books. So keep in mind while reading that what can we learn from the Lorax and apply to our own community? And what is an issue that you find as important as the Lorax does about protecting trees? Perfect. The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. At the far end of town, where the grickle grass grows, and the wind smells slow and sour when it blows, and no birds ever sing excepting old crows, is the street of the lifted Lorax. And deep in the grickle grass, some people say, if you look deep enough, you can still see today, where the Lorax once stood, just as long as it could, before somebody lifted the Lorax away. What was the Lorax, and why was it there? And why was it lifted and taken somewhere? From the far end of town where the grickle grass grows, the old Onceler still lives here. Ask him, he knows. You won't see the Onceler, don't knock at his door. He stays in his lurkum on top of his store. He lurks in his lurkum cold under the roof, where he makes his own clothes out of muffered moof. And on special dank midnights in August, he peeks out of the shutters, and sometimes he speaks, and he tells how the Lorax was lifted away. He'll tell you, perhaps, if you're willing to pay. On the end of a rope, he lets down a tin pail, and you have to toss in 15 cents and a nail, and the shell of a great-great-great-grandfather snail. Then he pulls up the pail, makes a most careful count to see if you've paid him the proper amount. Then he hides what you've paid him away in his snoove, his secret strange hole in his grooviest glove. Then he grunts, I will call you by, whisper my phone, for the secrets I tell you are for your ears alone. Sloop! Down slips the whisper-my-phone to your ear, and the old Onceler whispers are not very clear, since they have to come down through a snurgly hose, and he sounds as if he had smallish bees up his nose. Now I'll tell you, he says, with his teeth sounding gray, how the Lorax got lifted and taken away. It all started way back, such a long, long time back. Way back in the days when the grass was still green, and the pond was still wet, and the clouds were still clean, and the song of the swummy swans rang out in space. One morning I came to this glorious place, and I first saw the trees, the truffle trees, the bright-colored tufts of the truffle trees, mile after mile in the fresh morning breeze. And under the trees I saw brown babaloots frisking about in their babaloot suits, as they played in the shade and ate truffle fruits. From the rippleless pond came the comfortable sounds of the humming fish humming while splashing around. But those trees, those truffle trees. All my life I'd been searching for trees such as these. The touch of their tufts was much softer than silk, and they had their sweet smell of fresh buttery milk. I felt a great leaping of joy in my heart. I knew just what to do. I unloaded my cart. In no time at all, I had built a small shop. Then I chopped down a truffle tree with one chop. And with great skillful skill, with great speedy speed, I took the soft tuft and I knitted a thneed. The instant I'd finished, I heard a gazoomp. I looked. I saw something pop out of the stump of the tree I chopped down. It was sort of a man. Describe him? That's hard. I don't know if I can. He was shortish and oldish and brownish and mossy, and he spoke with a voice that was sharpish and bossy. "Mister," he said with a sawdusty sneeze, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees trees have no tongues. And I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs." He was very upset as he shouted and puffed, "What's that thing you've made out of my truffle truff?" "Look, Lorax," I said, "there's no cause for alarm. I chopped down just one tree. I am doing no harm. I'm being quite useful. This thing is a thneed. A thneed's a fine something that all people need. It's a shirt, it's a sock, it's a glove, it's a hat, but it has other uses. Yes, far beyond that. You can use it for carpets, for pillows, for sheets, or curtains or covers for bicycle seats." The Lorax said, "Sir, you are crazy with greed. There is no one on earth who would buy that fool thneed." But the very next minute, I proved he was wrong. For just at that minute, a chap came along, and he thought that the thneed I had knitten was great. He happily bought it for $30.98. I laughed at the Lorax. "You poor stupid guy, you could never tell what some people will buy." "I repeat," cried the Lorax, "I speak for the trees." "I'm busy," I told him. "Shut up, if you please." I rushed across the room and in no time at all built a radio phone. I put in a quick call. I called all my brothers and uncles and aunts, and I said, "Listen here, here's a wonderful chance for the whole Onceler family to get mighty rich. Get over here fast, take the road to the North Niche, turn left at Weehawken, sharp right at South Snitch." And in no time at all, the factory I built, the whole Onceler family was working full tilt. We were all knitting thneeds just as busy as bees, to the sound of the chopping of truffle trees. Then, oh baby, oh, now my business did grow. Now chopping one tree at a time was too slow. So I quickly invented my super axe hacker, which whacked off 4 truffle trees at one smacker. We were making thneeds 4 times fast as before, and the Lorax, he didn't show up anymore. But the next week, he knocked on my new office door. He snapped, "I'm the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you seem to be chopping as fast as you please. But I'm also in charge of the brown babaloots, who played in the shade of the barbaloot suits, and happily lived eating truffle fruits. Now, thanks to your hacking my trees to the ground, and there's not enough truffle fruits to go round. And my poor babaloots are getting in the crummies because they have gas and no food in their tummies. They loved living here, but I can't let them stay. They'll have to find food, and I hope that they may. Good luck, boys," he cried, and he sent them away. I, the Onceler, felt sad, but as I watched them go, but business is business, and business must grow. Regardless of crummies and tummies, you know. I mean no harm, I most truly did not, but I had to grow bigger, so bigger I got. I biggered my factory, I biggered my roads, I biggered my wagons, I biggered the loads. Of the thneeds I shipped out, I was shipping them forth to the south, to the east, to the west, to the north. I went right to biggering, selling more thneeds, and I biggered my money, which everyone needs. Then again he came back. I was fixing some pipes when the old nuisance Lorax came back with more gripes. "I am the Lorax," he coughed and he whiffed. He sneezed and he snuffed. He snargled, he sniffed. "Onceler," he cried with a cruffless croak. "Onceler, you're making such smogulous smoke. My poor swammy swans, why they can't sing a note, no one can sing who has smog in his throat." "And so," said the Lorax, "please pardon my cough. They cannot live here, so I'm sending them off." "Where will they go?" "I don't hopefully know. They may have to fly for a month or a year to escape the smog you've smoggled up around here. What's more, snapped the Lorax, his dander was up, let me say a few words about the gluppity-glup. Your machine chugs on day and night without stop making gluppity-glup and schluppity-schlup. And what do you do with this leftover goo? I'll show you, you dirty old once-la man, you. You're glumping the pond where the humming fish hummed. No more can they hum, for their gills are all gummed. So I'm sending them off. Oh, their future is dreary. They'll walk on their fins and get woefully weary in search of some water that isn't so smeary. And then I got mad. Oh, I got terribly mad. I yelled at the Lorax. Now listen here, Dad. All you do is yap yap and say bad, 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 bad. Well, I have my rights, sir, and I'm telling you, I intend to go on doing just what I do. And for your information, you Lorax, I'm figuring on biggering and biggering and biggering and biggering. Turning more truffula trees into thneeds, which everyone needs. Everyone needs! And at that moment, we heard a loud whack. From outside at the fields came a sickening smack of an axe on a tree. Then we all heard the tree fall, the very last truffula tree of them all. No more trees, no more thneeds, no more work to be done. So in no time, my uncles and aunts, every one, all waved me goodbye. They jumped into my cars and drove away under the smoke-smuggered stars. Now, all that was left beneath the bad-smelling sky was my big empty factory, and the Lorax and I. The Lorax said nothing, just gave me a very sad backward glance, as he lifted himself by the seats of his pants, and I'll never forget the grim look on his face when he heisted himself up and took leave of this place, through a hole in the smog without leaving a trace. And all that the Lorax left here in this mess was a small pile of rocks with one word, unless. Whatever that meant, well, I just couldn't guess. And that was a long, long ago, but each day since that day, I've sat here and worried away. Through the years, while my buildings have fallen apart, I've worried about it with all my heart. But now, says the once-la, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better, it's not. So, catch, calls the once-la. He let something fall. It's the last truffula seed. It's the last one of all. You're in charge of the last truffula seeds, and truffula trees are what everyone needs. Plant a new truffula, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest, protect it from the axes that hack. Then the Lorax and all of his friends may come back. So, what can we learn from the Lorax? The Lorax found a cause he cared about and protected it with his whole life. But we have to remember that we can't do this alone. There are many causes that you may be interested in being a part of, but when is it a proper time to stand up for something you believe in? There are many causes going on in our local community today. I'm going to bring to attention 4 different causes that you may be interested in addition to climate change activism. After the COVID-19 pandemic, many places saw economic hardship. One of those places are rent and mortgage crisis. Here we see people asking for rent strikes all across the world. Because of the sudden job loss of this pandemic, many people can't afford to pay their rent or mortgages. So people are banding together and suggesting that our federal and state government stop rent and mortgage payments. Whether you agree with that or not, that's one cause you can get behind. Another instance is the Amazon sick out. Everybody loves to get a package from Amazon. However, think about the workers in those factories. When people can't go to stores, they depend on online shopping. But those people that worked in the factories did not believe they were getting proper health care. And so they all staged a sick out where they united together and all called in a sick day. This brought about change in Amazon's policies to try and protect their workers at a better rate. Another cause you may be interested in supporting is the Liberate movement. Many people across the country are upset with the stay-at-home orders that have been executed, so they have staged protests at local capitol and governor's buildings. Here we see in Michigan, just to our north, a large protest that happened outside of the governor's mansion. This was in effort to reopen the country and lift the stay-at-home order restrictions because they believe they infringed on their constitutional rights. Whether or not we want to value our choices and freedom as Americans or the health and safety of others around us, although taking the economic hardship is up to you. But we have to remember that as a community, we also need to look out for one another. And this leads me to the most recent local headlines that have struck national news coverage of Dre'Shawn Reed. Dre'Shawn Reed was tragically killed just a few weeks ago by MyIND-TV. Many people believe that if Dre'Shawn's skin was white rather than black, that this would not have happened. So Indy-10 Black Lives Matter and many activist groups have staged protests all around the city, as we see here. These protests, as a part of Black Lives Matter, have been fighting against police brutality as well as the criminal justice system. This may be a cause you're interested in supporting because many young people are at the forefront of leading this change. Now, this is also at the national forefront after the killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. Now, you need to find a cause that you support. You can't necessarily let someone else tell you what you should believe in. You need to find that on your own. But what's important is that we all remember that we're in this together. Whether you're wearing a face mask when you go out, whether you're washing your hands anytime you're exposed to anything, whether you're calling your loved ones to make sure that they're taken care of and safe during this very uncertain time. We need to remember to stay united together, be open, listen to each other, and take care of one another. And remember, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. My name's Mr. Melrose, and this has been your home learning. Have a great day, guys. Be safe.
This is MyIPS on MyIND-TV 23. Here's what's coming up next.
All right, guys, welcome and thank you for joining me, all of my IPS families and anybody who's available to watch this with me right now. I'm so glad you're there, and we're going to really enjoy this book together. This is called The Bad Seed, and it is written by Jory John, and the illustrations are by Pete Oswald. So, as you can tell, this is going to be a pretty interesting story about a seed that is apparently bad. So, let's get into it and see what happens. I'm a bad seed. A bad seed. Oh yeah, it's true. The other seeds, they look at me and they say, that seed is so bad. When they think I'm not listening, they mumble, there goes a bad seed. All right. And if you guys remember our facial expressions lesson, you can see a lot of different emotions going on right here. And check out his eyebrows. All right. But I can hear them. I have good hearing for a seed. How bad am I? You really want to know? Well, I never put things back where they belong. I'm late to everything. I tell long jokes with no punchlines. I never wash my hands or my feet. I lie about pointless stuff. I cut in line every time. Those are pretty bad things, huh? I stare at everybody, I glare at everybody, I finish everybody's sentences, and I never listen. Look at that. It says, library, quiet please, and he's banging a drum. It's probably not very quiet. And I do lots of other bad things too. Know why? Because I'm a bad seed. A bad seed. I just can't help it. Sure, I wasn't always this bad. I was born a humble seed and on a simple sunflower in an unremarkable field. I had a big family, seeds everywhere. We found ways of having fun. We were close. And so I want you guys, if you can see, look at their facial expressions. And if you can find him in there, look at his eyebrows, because they don't quite look so angry while he's on his sunflower with his family. But then the petals dropped and our flower drooped. Like there's a couple of expressions, probably a lot of fear. It's kind of a blur. I remember a bag. Anybody have sunflower seeds before? Everything went dark. And then a giant. Yep. He's throwing that seed into his mouth to enjoy it during a softball game. But what he doesn't realize is that's our story character. I thought I was a goner. I thought I was done for. I screamed and I hollered, ah! Patoo! But I was spit out at the last possible second. I flew through the air and I landed under the bleachers with a huge thud. When I woke up, it was dark outside. A wad of gum had softened my fall. I felt okay, but something had changed in me. I'd become a different seed entirely. I'd become a bad seed. Interesting. A bad seed. That's right, I stopped smiling, I kept to myself, I drifted. I was friend to nobody and bad to everybody. I was lost on purpose. I lived inside a soda can. I didn't care, and it suited me. I wonder if it really suited him. Do you think that's really what he wants? Until recently, I've made a big decision. I've decided I don't want to be a bad seed anymore. I'm ready to be happy. It's hard to be good when you're so used to being bad, but I'm trying. I'm taking it one day at a time. Sure, I still forget to listen, and I still show up late, and I still talk during movies, and I do all kinds of other bad stuff. But I also say thank you, and I say please, and I smile, and I hold doors open for people. Not always, but sometimes. And even though I still feel bad sometimes, I feel kind of good also. It's sort of a mix. All I can do is keep trying and keep thinking, maybe I'm not such a bad seed after all. Hey, look, there goes that bad seed. Actually, he's not all that bad anymore. I heard that. The end. All right, guys, so I bet you caught on, but what I really love about this book is that this bad seed didn't start as a bad seed. And I want us to remember that because everybody started out as a good seed, right? We were all on our sunflower, happy when we were babies, and then sometimes things happen, and things happen to different people, and sometimes it hurts us. And when we're hurt, sometimes the only thing we know to do is to accidentally hurt other people. And sometimes we might not mean to, but it just happens because our body just sometimes makes some decisions for us. So remember that you are not your choices, and sometimes we all make bad choices, but that doesn't stop us from making more choices in the future that'll help us and help others rather than hurt us. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this book. I love it. Feel free to check out your local library. They can help you find books that are just like this one and read them together, because that is the best way to learn, is to just have something you enjoy together. All right, you have a good day, and reach out to us if you need anything. We miss you. Stay safe.
You've been watching MyIPS on MyINDY-TV 23. A free educational service provided by Circle City Broadcasting of Indianapolis. MyIPS airs weekday mornings from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. For more information, special announcements, and the weekly program schedule, go to wishtv.com. You can also follow us on Facebook.
Look around. Listen. We're moving to a new beat. a colorful symphony, each note made more beautiful by the next. We are driven by talent in the classroom, in each school, that recognizes the potential in every student and knows the opportunity to achieve is not an option, it's expected. We are not alone. We stand among giants, eager to help, eager to give back and build bonds to last generations. We are part of a city fueled by grit, strength, and determination. Racing toward a future full of potential, where hard work really does pay off. When one succeeds, we all succeed. We're innovative, we're industrious, we're imaginative. We are your Indianapolis Public Schools, and we're stronger together.